So, welcome to another episode of, maybe the second or so, Zormau's Airsoft Corner. Today I'm going to be talking about my Tokyo Marui V10, which is not a standard Tokyo Marui V10 anymore, but instead is a Garda aluminum kit Tokyo Marui V10. It is a ultra compact Springfield clone that originally came to me with this slide, stock TM slide. I bought it new, and this frame, not these grips. These grips, well, I got these with the second-hand frame that I got, aluminum frame that I got. It is a ABS plastic slide and frame by default. It is okay, especially if you hold on to the Hogue grips that it comes with, but it is still not as nice as, for example, the high kappa DOR's plastic, although that one also has a terrible grip, or the FNX. But let's get back to this gun here. The V10 is constructed like basically a small 1911 by Tokyo Marui. It has a slide and a frame that is not quite normal 1911 spec. For example, it uses the narrower front portion here that you also find on the high kappa DOR or on the 5.1 gold match. And it has a shortened inner frame and relatively short rails. Everything is solid out of the box though, so the parts work really well together. The safety is very positive. The trigger is quite decent. But it is very light. Well, it's surprisingly heavy because there are weights inside these whole grips. It feels nice and it feels surprisingly heavy actually for its weight, for its size. And especially for being plastic. The way it works is there's a metal rail insert that goes in here in the slide. I have the steel replacement here that I'm not using right now because I don't need to. And that's partly what guides the slide, and especially that is the surface that the slide lock engages on. Let me just demonstrate that. I don't know how well you can see in there, but the slide lock there engages on that inner rail instead of on the slide itself, meaning that there won't be any damage to the slide from repeatedly using the slide lock, because there's just no contact between the two. Installing the Garda kit is not really worth mentioning because everything was drop-in for me. I didn't really have to do any filing, just a bit of abrasion when it was new and got to me. It's still a bit rough, the surface, but that'll wear in more and more, I think. But what's really neat about this is this recoil spring assembly here has a very stiff internal plunger in the guide rod. So this recoil spring here is really soft. It is a very, very soft spring, but it gets a boost at the end of travel. Meaning that if I put it back together and lock the slide back to the rear, I need to overcome quite a bit of resistance from this point forward, from this point onward. So there does need to be a fair bit of pressure in the magazine for it to lock open successfully. But on the other hand, you have a essentially very lightweight spring system that doesn't require a lot of spring force, a lot of pressure to function, but still gives you a very snappy shooting experience. For example, these magazines are commander size magazines. They are very small, hold only 4 grams of gas, but they are really, really snappy. Out of these 4 grams of gas, you get around 30 to 40 shots, depending on temperature and your shooting cadence. I did initially feed this gun 110 gas, but I have very soon switched to propane, even with the plastic slide, and it hasn't complained. The plastic slide, for reference, weighs 26 grams plus everything you put into it, meaning the rail here, the blowback unit, and the spring guide housing plug at the front. So there is not that much moving mass by default, and the aluminum kit ups this to 60 grams plus the plus everything you put into it, so you gain 34 grams. If you put a lightweight Garda or Nova blowback unit into this, which exists, you can actually get the aluminum slide and only put on 12 grams of weight. So I'm kind of considering that because it would be kind of neat to have a really snappy, really lightweight and efficient aluminum miniature 1911. I'm also not going to take the frame apart. There are enough videos on 1911s and high kappas that you could reference for that. It works exactly like those. Well, like a 1911, not quite like a kappa. The slide assembly has the guide plug. Everything slides out the front. The inner barrel is secured with a hex screw to the outer barrel and the hop-up unit. I haven't changed anything about this hop-up unit. I haven't shot it at range as well. I've only shot it at like 7 meters down the basement. And for that it was perfectly serviceable. I can hit a small target at those distances, and I am confident that I could hit a man-sized target at 20 meters, no issue. I mean, there is Concept's video in which he basically lands relatively reliable hits with .25s out of this gun in stock configuration at 40 meters at 12 degrees Celsius, which kind of goes to show that TM do know their stuff. That is also the Garda steel outer barrel, which just looks so much nicer than the stock one. My stock one is a bit, well, borked because I did some experimentation about converting this to a high kappa frame, which doesn't quite work. But the standard plastic barrel isn't nearly as good looking as the steel outer barrel. Doesn't tank efficiency. Minor effect on cold weather function or cold temperature function by my experience with experiments, but I think it's worth it. Another point that I should point out about this pistol is when you get it, the blowback unit is held in with these screws. These are Phillips screws. Turkey Marui love their Phillips screws. I hate their Phillips screws with a passion. I was lucky enough not to strip either of those, but they are not in the best shape anymore. But to take out the blowback unit, you need to obviously remove those. Is that the right size, or do I need a smaller one? I think I need a smaller Allen key for those. When you prepare a Allen key that should fit, but it's still too large. Come on, give me the 1.5. Where is it? There it is. Once you take out the blowback unit, which is quite easy on this Garda slide, easier than on the original slide, I can show you something else. It has a 15mm diameter nozzle, by the way, which is quite a bit larger than the 13.5 you find normally on 1911s from TM. The rear sight is pot metal. It's a Novak style, licensed actually. And the BBU just drops out. It also has no play in there, it's just a perfect fit. The nozzle return spring is a bit tricky, because you can put the nozzle return spring in after you put in the BBU from the top, which is a really nice touch. However, on the stock slide, which I'm going to put this in right now, you can see that there's this central divider bar in the middle. That prevents the nozzle return spring from moving out of alignment with the nozzle. That is absent, come out, on the garter setup. The garter frame slide doesn't have that. So what I've had happen is that this spring slides to the side and gets kinked. You can see that spring is worse for wear. I will replace it eventually, but for now it functions. What I've done to mitigate that is I've added a small metal rod to the nozzle's ear by drilling a hole through it and gluing that in. It is not the prettiest solution. It might weaken this ear a bit, but it has worked so far. It's not caused any damage or broken, and it's also not affected efficiency or anything like that. Another solution that I could see worth tried is grinding a channel through the top here and gluing in a nail or a thin metal rod down the side that prevents this, has the same effect as this separator bar in the original slide, and prevents this from moving to the side as well. Might be worth a try, because there is enough room for that, obviously, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to use that bar. But it's not something that is present on the garter slide, which is really, that is the biggest flaw of this slide. By the way, it also comes with a separate is it the extractor? I think it's the extractor or ejector plunger that is screwed in with a grub screw. Now, putting the nozzle back in. Oh, yeah. Drop in. Sits in there really, really nicely. Now, I can install the nozzle return spring, obviously, which is always a good idea. Normally I'd lube that before I put it back in, but still lubey enough. Put that over this peg and it's in there. I can use this very neat sight bar block for the Marui Micro Pro sight. It by default only works with a Micro Pro sight because it has a 14mm hole distance and the according pegs for the MPS. Am I getting in there? No, not quite. Let's see. Yeah, now it's aligned. Oops, that didn't sound good. The bit slipped. But I have spare screws if need be. Yeah, that bit is pretty much done. I need to get a better one for that. But for now, that'll do. Then you put on this cap. And afterwards, you could take the Micro Pro sight, which I have currently mounted to my DOR. It's a bit of an ugly duckling if you do that, by the way. It looks very, very weird for a small 1911 with a rather tall red dot on the back, but it's definitely more practical, especially if the target isn't exactly brightly illuminated, than these Novak sights, which I find kind of hard to use. There's no functional difference in terms of that problem with the nozzle spring that I mentioned earlier between the sight base and the Novak sight. Neither of them have anything to stabilize it, but they are both quite tight on the slide, which is good. That also goes on there. Oh, well, that one's no longer tight because I've had it on and off quite a bit. Put it back on. Slide it over, and then thread the screws in. That's one. Not really tightened right now because, like I said, that bit is done. Yeah, that'll do. Before I destroy the screws, it is solid on there, doesn't wiggle. Good. I'm not gonna take this apart either because it is a proprietary, unique to the V10 blowback power unit, but it's functionally identical to other TNs. Has this dial for adjustment, standard TM bucking and nub in there. It's a black barrel, as you might see, black inner barrel that doesn't visually stand out. Nothing to write home about there. 6.08 probably. But it still gets 0.7 joules on propane and 0.32s. Where did I put the slide stop? There. Slide stop goes in. It's a really neat gun. Like I said, it gets through a mag and through 1.5 mags on a fill. It has 22 rounds of capacity and plenty of gas for those. Even at colder temperatures, I tried it at with the magazines at freezing and below freezing, and they always managed to clear. I don't know how many I've fired through this mag before, like 6. It does keep chugging. Very nice piece.